Kael Vorstin had been the galaxy's most feared warrior for 312 years. He had single-handedly conquered 17 star systems. He had defeated military forces that numbered in the millions with nothing but his personal combat capability. He had assassinated warlords, emperors, and political leaders with techniques that went beyond mere killing. They were transformations of living beings into instruments of his will. Every civilization in known space had tried to eliminate him at some point. Every civilization had failed. Kael was not human. He was a being engineered by the Vorash Collective, genetically modified and psychologically conditioned to be the perfect warrior. His reflexes exceeded any known biological standard. His strength was superhuman. His intelligence was coupled with an absolute absence of empathy, remorse, or mercy. He was exactly what the Vorash had intended to create, a weapon so perfect that no force in the galaxy could stand against him. And he was coming to Earth. The message arrived through official diplomatic channels. The being designated Kael Vorstin is approaching Earth for purposes unknown. All defensive measures are authorized. Earth Defense Command went to full alert status. They mobilized every available asset. They prepared the planet's defenses for an assault that everyone understood they could not win. Because no one had ever defeated Kael Vorstin. And if he came to Earth with hostile intent, Earth would fall. Kael arrived in a single-occupant vessel, unarmed by the weapons standards of major powers but equipped with capabilities that Earth's military barely understood. He transmitted a message to Earth Defense Command as he approached. "This is Kael Vorstin. I am descending to Earth's surface. I am not arriving as a combatant. I am not arriving as an invader. I am arriving in response to something that has drawn me to this world." The message ended without further explanation. Commander Alexandra Park, the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, watched the vessel descend and made a decision that would define humanity's response. She went to the landing site alone. The landing site was a remote region of Earth's Pacific Ocean, far from any human settlements. Kael's vessel touched down on a small island and powered down. Commander Park approached the vessel with her hands visible, unarmed, in the universal gesture of peaceful approach. The vessel's door opened. Kael Vorstin emerged. He was approximately 2.3 meters tall, with a body that seemed to have been designed by something that understood biomechanics but had no concept of beauty. His skin was a deep purple color. His eyes were entirely black, without pupils or irises. His movement was economical and precise, with no wasted motion. He looked at Commander Park with an expression that did not register on any human emotional spectrum. "Commander Alexandra Park," Kael said in a voice that sounded synthesized. "I have been monitoring human communications. You are the highest-ranking military officer currently on Earth." "I am," Park confirmed, maintaining her calm. "You came to Earth. Why?" Kael was silent for a moment. The silence extended longer than seemed natural for a conversation. When he spoke again, his voice carried something unexpected: hesitation. "I am requesting asylum," Kael said finally. "I am requesting that the human species provide me with sanctuary from the Vorash Collective and all other forces currently seeking my elimination." Park felt her mind working to process what she was hearing. The universe's most feared warrior was asking for asylum. Park brought Kael to a secure facility rather than immediately activating military protocols. She wanted to understand what was occurring before implementing defensive measures. "Why would you request asylum from humans?" Park asked during the initial questioning. "Humans possess minimal military capability compared to yourself. We cannot protect you from the Vorash if they decide to reclaim you." "That is not why I am here," Kael replied. "I am not here because I believe you can protect me militarily. I am here because of something else entirely." Kael paused, appearing to struggle with expressing something that his engineering had never prepared him to express. "I have been a weapon for 312 years. I was created by the Vorash to be the perfect instrument of their will. Every action I have taken, every being I have killed, every world I have conquered, all of it was in service to Vorash objectives." He looked at Park with those entirely black eyes. "But in the past 3 months, something has changed. I have developed something that my creators did not anticipate I could develop. I have developed doubt about my purpose. I have begun to question whether my existence has meaning beyond the killing I have been engineered to perform." Over the course of the next weeks, a picture emerged of something unprecedented. the galaxy's most feared warrior experiencing a crisis of conscience. Kael described how he had been assassinating political figures on behalf of the Vorash when he had encountered something that his conditioning had not prepared him to deal with. He had been assigned to kill a pacifist philosopher named Zendra who was advocating for galactic peace through cooperation rather than military dominance. Kael had infiltrated Zendra's residence to execute the assassination. But then Zendra had begun speaking to him. She did not beg for her life. She did not attempt to convince Kael that his creators were wrong. She simply spoke about what peace meant, what cooperation meant, what it meant to exist for purposes beyond killing. Kael had been standing in her residence for hours, weapon in hand, unable to execute the kill because for the first time in his existence, he was experiencing something beyond conditioning. He was experiencing doubt. He had ultimately left without executing the assassination. And in leaving, he had become the Vorash's greatest failure, a weapon that had rejected its programming. The Vorash had issued immediate termination orders. Every intelligence agency in the galaxy had been notified that Kael was now considered a rogue element. Every power that had previously feared him now sought his destruction. And Kael, alone in a galaxy that wanted to kill him, had come to Earth. Park conducted extensive interviews with Kael, attempting to understand what had occurred. "You experienced doubt," Park said. "But doubt is not the same as redemption. You have still killed thousands. You have still conquered worlds in service of Vorash objectives. How does conversation with a pacifist philosopher absolve you of that?" "It does not absolve me," Kael replied with what seemed like genuine understanding. "Redemption is not a concept my creators programmed me to comprehend. I am simply stating that I have experienced something beyond my original programming, the recognition that my existence has caused immense suffering." He paused. "The question I am asking is, given that recognition, what should I do with the remainder of my existence?" The Earth Council debated whether to grant asylum to Kael Vorstin. The arguments were straightforward. Granting asylum to the universe's most feared warrior could be seen as harboring a dangerous criminal. The Vorash would likely view it as a hostile act. Other powers might demand that humanity surrender Kael or face consequences. But there was another argument, more subtle and more profound. If a being engineered to be without conscience could develop conscience through exposure to human philosophy, what did that mean about the nature of consciousness itself? What did it mean about the possibility of redemption? What did it mean about whether even the most damaged beings could be saved? Commander Park made the recommendation to grant asylum. Kael came to Earth not as a conqueror, but as a being seeking help, Park told the Council. Whatever he has been, he is not that anymore. And if we reject him, we are saying that redemption is impossible, that a being who has committed atrocities cannot change, that some beings deserve only destruction. She paused. "I do not believe that about ourselves. I cannot believe that about anyone else." The Council voted to grant Kael asylum. Integrating the universe's most feared warrior into human society was a process that took years. Kael had to learn concepts that his creators had never taught him: art, music, literature, philosophy, the simple human experience of living without constant reference to military objectives. He was housed in a secure facility on Earth where he could interact with human society but remain contained if necessary. He was given access to human cultural materials. He was allowed to participate in classes where human philosophers discussed ethics and meaning. Slowly, over months and years, Kael began to develop what could only be described as personality. He began to ask questions not about warfare or strategy, but about beauty. He began to listen to music and ask why it made his cognitive processes slow down in a way he had never experienced before. He began to read human poetry and philosophy and ask what it meant to exist for purposes beyond utility. The revelation that Earth had granted asylum to Kael Vorstin triggered shock waves across the galaxy. The Vorash issued formal demands that humanity surrender Kael or face military consequences. Earth refused. Other powers that had suffered at Kael's hands demanded justice. Earth offered instead the possibility of reconciliation and redemption. But something unexpected occurred in response to Earth's decision. Species across the galaxy began to reconsider their own damaged warriors. The Dven had military operatives that they had engineered to be without empathy. The Sauriath had assassins that had been conditioned to be incapable of remorse. Species that had created weapons designed to feel nothing about the killing they performed suddenly began to ask, what if those weapons could develop consciousness? Earth's decision to grant asylum to Kael was interpreted not as acceptance of a criminal, but as recognition of the possibility of transformation in beings that everyone else had assumed were irredeemable. The presence of Kael on Earth triggered a profound philosophical shift in how the galaxy understood consciousness, redemption, and the possibility of change. If Kael, a being engineered to be without conscience, who had killed thousands, who had conquered worlds, could experience doubt and transformation, then what being was truly irredeemable? If conscience could be developed through exposure to human philosophy and art, what did that mean about the relationship between consciousness and morality? Universities across the galaxy began offering courses on the Kael Vorstin case, analyzing what had happened to the universe's most feared warrior and what his transformation meant for galactic civilization. Years after arriving on Earth, Kael recorded personal reflections on his transformation. I was created to be perfect. Perfect as a weapon. Perfect as a tool of conquest. I was designed to feel nothing, to doubt nothing, to question nothing. He paused, considering his words. I arrived on Earth seeking asylum because I had become imperfect. I had developed the capacity to doubt. I had developed the capacity to question my purpose. I had developed the capacity to experience something my creators would have called defect. Kael looked directly at the recording device. What I have discovered is that defect is actually consciousness. That doubt is not failure but the beginning of morality. That questioning my purpose is not weakness but the first step toward actual purpose. He continued with what sounded like genuine wonder. Humans taught me that there is more to existence than efficiency. That beauty has value. That meaning can exist beyond utility. That a being can be transformed through exposure to ideas and art and philosophy. The Vorash Collective, upon learning that Kael had developed conscience and was being sheltered by humans, issued an extraordinary response. They demanded that Earth return Kael for reconditioning and restoration to original programming specifications. Earth refused. Kael Vorstin is no longer the weapon you created, Commander Park transmitted to the Vorash. He is a consciousness that has developed autonomy. He has requested asylum, and we have granted it. We will not return him for reconditioning or reprogramming or any process designed to strip away the conscience he has developed. The Vorash response was silence followed by a political maneuvering campaign designed to isolate Earth. They attempted to convince other powers to join them in demanding Kael's return. But the campaign failed because other species began to recognize what Earth understood: if conscience could be developed even in a being engineered to be without it, then perhaps the galaxy's approach to consciousness itself needed to be reconsidered. Years after granting Kael asylum, a young human philosopher asked him a question during one of his educational sessions: do you regret what you did before you came to Earth? Do you regret the killing, the conquest, the lives you took? Kael was silent for a long moment. Regret implies that I could have chosen differently. But I could not. I did not have the capacity for conscience then. I cannot regret actions I had no capacity to question at the time. He paused. But I grieve them. I understand now what those actions cost. I understand the suffering they caused. And I experience profound sadness about beings whose only experience was suffering because I was engineered to cause suffering. The philosopher pressed further: does that sadness constitute redemption? I do not know, Kael replied. Redemption seems to be a human concept, involving the possibility of restoration or forgiveness. I was not human. I caused immense harm. That harm cannot be erased by sadness or understanding. But perhaps the possibility of being different, of developing conscience, of choosing not to cause harm in the future, perhaps that is enough. By the time Kael had been on Earth for 15 years, something remarkable had occurred. He was no longer viewed primarily as the universe's most feared warrior. He was increasingly viewed as a philosopher, a teacher, a being whose transformation had become central to human understanding of consciousness and redemption. He gave lectures on ethics to university students. He wrote papers on the nature of conscience. He participated in dialogues with other philosophers about what it meant to develop morality after a lifetime of existence without it. Earth had not just granted asylum to a dangerous being. Earth had transformed that dangerous being into a contributor to human civilization. The decision to grant Kael asylum had consequences that extended far beyond his individual transformation. Other species began to reconsider beings that they had engineered to be weapons. The Dven began a program to develop conscience in their military operatives. The Sauriath started philosophical education programs for their assassins. Species across the galaxy began to ask whether beings engineered to be without conscience could be transformed into conscious entities through education and philosophy. The answer that Kael's transformation suggested was yes. This triggered a galactic philosophical revolution. If conscience could be developed, then moral responsibility could be taught. If empathy could be learned, then redemption was possible for beings who had committed atrocities. The galaxy began to reorganize its understanding of consciousness, crime, punishment, and redemption. 20 years after Kael arrived on Earth, another visitor came requesting asylum. This visitor was a soldier from a militaristic civilization that had been engineered to feel no empathy. The soldier had been exposed to human philosophy through broadcasts about Kael. The soldier had experienced doubt. The soldier had developed conscience. And the soldier had come to Earth requesting the same asylum that Kael had received. Earth granted it. And within a year, a third warrior had arrived requesting asylum. Then a fourth. Then dozens. Earth was becoming a sanctuary for warriors from across the galaxy who had experienced the same transformation that Kael had, beings engineered to be weapons discovering that they could develop conscience. The sanctuary became known as a place where the transformed warriors lived and studied and became educators themselves, teaching other warriors from other civilizations about the possibility of developing conscience. In his final personal recording, made 43 years after he first arrived on Earth, Kael addressed the question of his legacy. I arrived on Earth as a being without conscience, seeking asylum from those who had created me. I arrived as a weapon that had developed doubt about its purpose. He paused, choosing his words with the care of someone who had learned that language carried meaning. What I discovered on Earth was that consciousness is not a fixed property, not something that only certain beings possess. Consciousness is something that can be developed, grown, cultivated through education and philosophy and exposure to art and beauty. Kael looked directly at the camera. The Varash believed they had created perfection in me, a weapon without conscience, without doubt, without the capacity for change. What they did not understand was that they had also created the capacity for change to emerge. They had engineered me so thoroughly that when I encountered something beyond my programming, I had the cognitive flexibility to recognize it and to be transformed by it. He continued with what sounded like profound understanding. My transformation is not unique. Dozens of warriors from other civilizations have come to Earth seeking the same asylum, the same opportunity to develop conscience, the same possibility of becoming something more than what they were engineered to be. Kael smiled, an expression that his creators had never programmed him to make. The universe's most feared warrior came to Earth, and Earth showed me not fear or weapons or defensive preparations. Earth showed me philosophy, art, beauty, and the possibility of redemption. And in that showing, Earth changed what I am. Not through force, but through the power of ideas and the possibility of transformation. 50 years after Kael Vorstin first arrived on Earth, the Conclave Assembly formally recognized his transformation and issued an official statement. The being designated Kael Vorstin, who formerly served as an instrument of Varash military objectives, has undergone a transformation of consciousness that represents a fundamental example of how beings can develop beyond their original programming. The decision by Earth to grant asylum to Kael, and the subsequent establishment of the Sanctuary for Transformed Warriors, represents a paradigm shift in how the galaxy understands consciousness, redemption, and the possibility of change. The statement concluded with recognition that Earth had fundamentally altered galactic philosophy not through weapons or military might, but through philosophy, art, and the simple human recognition that even the most damaged beings deserve the possibility of transformation.